Okay, hello everyone. Well, by the way, first of all, finished this course. Is say what you think about it in the comments or in the chat. Yeah, it's handmade, as you've seen in past streams. Yeah, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. Okay, now I'm making another one. Now it's purple. So yeah, we'll again watching videos, spooky videos. Yeah, okay, I'll start with this. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Feels like a movie, but I want to watch what I saw Joe B watching it from. He's a YouTuber or streamer that I wanted to watch also. I haven't watched his reaction because I didn't want spoilers, but it looked quite interesting, so probably watch it and I'll probably watch it sometime, I hope. I'm not sure when, but okay. So let's start with this one, I guess. A minute. Forgot to share screen. Here we go. So this is it.
Little different from my others, in that I'm going to focus on one story instead of three. Now, to begin, everyone knows what a crawl space is, whether you have one or you don't. An unoccupied, narrow space within a home between the ground and the first floor, usually in place of a basement and used for storage. Usually, the scariest things you'd find in a crawl space would be rodents or giant spider crickets jumping at you. But Jake Binger found something much more disturbing than any creepy creatures in his crawl space. In a nice area of Firestone, Colorado, Jake owns his own house where his girlfriend lives with him. Jake had met his girlfriend, who remains nameless, at a comedy club in town, and the two hit it off and would eventually start to date. At some point during this time, she opened up to him about her old abusive ex. She described her ex as a ticking time bomb, how he could at times be very sweet, and that she loved his more gentle side, but that he could switch to a completely different person just like a flick of a switch. And in this alternate personality of his, he was a very aggressive, scary man who would do things like fight bouncers at bars or punch holes in walls when angry, or even sometimes getting physical with her, and he got angry rather easily. Things would become so rocky between the two that eventually she would end things with her ex, but he didn't take that news well. She feared that her ex was stalking her parents' house at late hours of the night because either she or her parents would hear sounds from the backyard, like the gate slamming shut or the backyard shed door closing. Her ex disabled all forms of social media after the breakup, and she became so concerned for her well-being that she decided to move in with her current boyfriend, Jake. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with anything? Well, on one regular night that Jake's girlfriend wasn't in the house with him, he was in his living room when he heard noises from in the crawl space. He moved from his living room to his kitchen and sat at the island for a while, continuing to listen and hearing strange occasional thumping sounds from directly below him. It was at this time that he started to record a video for his Snapchat story, assuming what he was hearing was an animal of some kind, such as a raccoon.
This is a table. Potatoes on the floor.
As he enters his crawl space, he stops recording for a second so that he could take another video with the flash on so that he could navigate the crawl space. The crawl space appears to be mostly empty, aside from some boxes that were tucked into one corner. Jake says when he saw these boxes this way, he was confused because he didn't remember leaving them that way.
Someone in this bag. Oh, this bag. Oh, damn, this is big. Oh, damn.
As Jake walks deeper into the crawl space where the left side expands further down, Jake says he heard a noise in one corner, like pebbles being scraped on the concrete floor. As he heard the noise, he turned to the corner where he saw the terrifying sight of a hunched over man dressed in all black. He was hiding in the corner behind a wall, now getting up and approaching Jake. Jake's scream sounded like a legitimate scream from somebody witnessing something as disturbing as an intruder hiding in their crawl space and then basically lunging at them. The video cuts out seconds later, as being that it was a Snapchat video. Once he let go of the record button, the video stopped. At this point, Jake explained that he ran back to the ladder of the crawl space, and as he climbed up, the man grabbed his foot and tried to pull him down. But Jake managed to kick his way out of the grip and slam the crawl space door in his face. Unfortunately, the door to the closet, which contained the crawl space door, didn't have a lock. So Jake's first instinct was to run to the kitchen and grab the biggest knife, then lock himself inside the bathroom. He heard the closet door open and then footsteps come over to the bathroom door, and then the man on the other side of the door try the doorknob. Not knowing what kind of weapons the person might have had, Jake didn't engage the intruder in a fight. Instead, he silently called 911 and kept the line going, and eventually, he heard footsteps quickly leave the house out the front door. Now, Jake told the 911 operator about the break-in, and so police came to the house, conducted a quick investigation, and a police report was created for the incident. Jake's girlfriend refused to come to the house after hearing of the incident because she swore left and right that the man had to be her ex. It's impossible to make out any notable facial features on the man in the video. Jake says he saw that the man was wearing a black mask and his head was covered by a hood, which you can kind of see in the video. Jake also described the man to have a very tall-looking, intimidating stature, despite his hunched-over posture in the crawl space. Jake's girlfriend's ex was a very tall man, and upon watching the video, she swears it looks just like his body. Of course, this is just speculation on her part. And without solid evidence, legally they don't have much of a leg to stand on as far as pressing charges. In the video, though, loud thumping and hammering type sounds could be heard in the beginning. And after investigating, Jake found that the intruder had ripped through some of the insulation of the crawl space and had been hammering at some of the wood in the ceiling of the crawl space, and also some of the pipes. It's unknown why he was doing this. It was also discovered that the key that the couple hides in one of their sheds outside was missing, which already revealed how the intruder got inside. It might insinuate that the man who broke in had his eyes on the house for a while. Jake changed the locks on the door that same day, but his girlfriend has yet to return to that house, worried that it's now being stalked by her crazy ex-boyfriend. Jake has installed a Ring doorbell camera recently, and on several occasions, he's gotten a notification from his Alexa device that there's someone at his front door, but there's never anybody actually there, not visibly at least. While there isn't any solid evidence as to who the intruder was, it may be a strong possibility that it is in fact her ex-boyfriend. What started as a guy simply trying to get a funny Snapchat story of what he assumed to be a raccoon in his crawl space turned into something much more horrifying. The start of a nightmare even. Jake said he would keep me updated on the matter, so if any new information comes up, I'd consider making a follow-up if you guys would be interested.
Yeah, this is not, I guess it's not the same. This one could be nice watching, because it's also long. A few more. So yeah, as usual, Mr. Nightman. Okay. So let's see if he's.
Oh, the first.
Yeah. So yeah, it was nice. It was nice. I'll give it like, thinking a 6 out of 10, but yeah, I'll give it a 6 out of 10 personally. But I mean, it wasn't, but it was nice. I liked it, but it wasn't that good. No offense, Mr. Nightmare, I feel you, but yeah, okay. Let's okay. Let's share screen again.
Was already able to connect our.
In 2016, a couple was walking up this dirt path on this wooded hillside when they came up to this huge barbed wire fence. And all over this fence were signs saying,
I feel like also it's just my second video watching him, but it's both of them started with couples walking somewhere. Just
saying no trespassing and warning people that what was on the other side of this fence was very dangerous. But the couple ignored these signs and slipped through a break in the fence to the other side and just kept on walking. Minutes later, that couple would come face to face with a monster. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer to do the like button's dishes, but be sure to leave all of the cups and bowls right side up inside of their dishwasher. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Mr. Bowler. Is it actually his name? Yeah, Mr. Bowler. Oh, no spoilers.
While she was in high school in Dayton, Ohio, Raquel Bain became known as a bit of a thrill seeker, primarily because she would do something called car surfing, which is exactly what it sounds like. She would climb onto the exterior of cars and hold on to the roof while somebody else drove it around. In addition to seeking out these physical thrills, Raquel was also drawn to psychological ones, like going to places that were supposedly haunted and seeing if she could spook herself. Following high school, Raquel kind of calmed down and became less of the wild teenager she was known for being, and instead she really focused on building a life and a career for herself. And so she would go to college and she would earn her degree in surgical technologies. And then by 2009, she was employed full-time as a surgical assistant in Dayton. Also around that time, she had her first child, a son who she adored. But despite creating this life full of stereotypically adult, mature things like having a career and starting a family, deep down, Raquel was still very much the thrill-seeking wild teenager she was back in high school. But as an adult, she just never had time to go seek out those thrills. So with that in mind, fast forward to April of 2016. By this point, Raquel is 26 years old. And that month, a very rare weekend popped up where Raquel did not have to work and she didn't have any childcare responsibilities. And so wanting to take advantage of this free time, Raquel asked her boyfriend, 41-year-old David Nee, if he would join her on a road trip that weekend to Louisville, Kentucky, where Raquel wanted to check out the infamously scary Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Back in the 1900s, Waverly Hills was a place where tuberculosis patients were sent. Tuberculosis, or TB for short, is an infection of the lungs and it can be deadly. Today, there's a cure for it, but back in the early 1900s, there wasn't. And so most of the people who went to Waverly Hills died there, and usually very slowly and painfully and in total isolation from their families, because in virtue of being sent to Waverly Hills, they were effectively being quarantined to stop the spread of the disease. Waverly Hills would eventually shut down permanently in 1961 because by that point the cure had been found. And after it shut down, the building basically just sat there. Nobody else came in and turned it into anything else. And so this building is basically abandoned and lots of people began sneaking in to see what it was like in there. And a shocking number of these trespassers reported seeing ghosts inside. Today, the sanatorium is still very much in the same condition it was left in, but the Waverly Hills Historical Society has stepped in and made it very hard for people to sneak into the building. However, knowing people do want to go in and look around, the Historical Society has begun offering guided tours of the sanatorium. And these tours are given exclusively at night to increase the spooky effect. And so David, who had only been dating Raquel for a month when she asked him to come with her to the sanatorium, he was not really that keen on doing this. It did not really appeal to him to go walking around this totally terrifying place. But he could tell it was important to Raquel. She was really excited about it. And so he agreed to go. A few days later, on the late afternoon of April 23rd, the new couple left Raquel's place, they climbed into the car, and they began driving south. 3 hours later, they arrived in Louisville and they stopped to get dinner. And then after they were done eating, they looked at the time and realized it was only about 6:45 p.m. And the tour they had scheduled at the sanatorium was not until 10 p.m. So they had a few hours to kill. And before David could suggest anything, Raquel already had the perfect idea of how they should kill this time. She told David that earlier that day, she had learned about a spot just outside of Louisville that might actually be more terrifying than the sanatorium they had come all this way to see. And so Raquel wanted to spend these few hours checking out this new spooky spot. This spooky spot was a rickety old, narrow, abandoned-looking bridge called the Pope Lick Trestle. It's located just east of downtown Louisville in this heavily wooded area. The bridge is about 800 feet long, and at its highest point, right in the middle of the bridge, it's about 90 to 100 feet off the ground. And this bridge connects the tops of two of the bigger rolling hills in the area. But the bridge's physical appearance has nothing to do with why it's considered so spooky. The reason the Pope Lick Trestle has become a central part of Kentucky folklore is because locals say there is a monster called the Pope Lick Monster that lives underneath the bridge. It's half goat, half man, and when anyone is near this bridge at night, this monster is supposed to come out from underneath this bridge, and then what happens next is very ambiguous. It kind of depends on who you're talking to, but generally speaking, once the Pope Lick Monster has emerged and it sees you, you're dead. Now, how you die ranges from the monster leaping out and attacking you with an axe to the monster using some sort of mind control to lure you up onto the bridge where you leap off. David, after hearing this suggestion, was again not really that keen to go do this really terrifying sounding thing, but seeing the excitement in his girlfriend's face, he agreed to go. And so the two left the restaurant, they climbed back in the car, and they drove for about 15 or 20 minutes to the Pope Lick Trestle Bridge. The bridge actually passed over a relatively main road, and so the couple parked just off the side of this main road. And then once they were outside, they began looking for a pathway up this hillside to get up to the bridge. And very quickly, they found a well-worn dirt path that snaked up the side of this wooded hillside that looked very much like it would bring them up to the bridge. So with Raquel in front and David behind her, they began walking up this dirt path. And as they're walking, they start to see signs that clearly say, no trespassing. But they ignore them because they're looking at this path thinking, okay, lots of people clearly come up here, so we've got to be okay. And so they keep on walking up this path, and they're getting closer and closer to the top of this hill where they think it's going to connect with this bridge. And right as they're getting close, they see there's this huge chain link fence, this 8-foot tall chain link fence with barbed wire across the top that extends in either direction out of view. And so the couple walks up to this fence, and there are more signs that say no trespassing, private property, and there are additional warning signs saying that what is on the other side of this fence is also just plain dangerous. So turn around and leave. Every fall, when the leaves start to turn colors and the weather starts to get cool, people flock in droves to their nearest coffee shop to order a pumpkin spice latte. And every year, when I see this phenomenon occur, I think to myself, how hasn't anyone started a seasonal eel teeth and milk sandwich restaurant? It's such an obvious compliment to the pumpkin spice latte. Well, this year, far from the path, David are... As Raquel and David are staring at all these signs and this fence, they see, not far from the path, somebody had clearly bent two of the fence posts and created a narrow gap in the fence that you could slip through. And so from David and Raquel's perspective, that looked like the way other trespassers must have found their way up to the bridge, and so it must be safe. And so once again, the couple disregarded all the warnings. They made their way over to...
Over transpose died. Yeah, but it's a bit of a delay, but yeah, I needed to find that. Well, I'm not saying it good still, but this is how transpassers died. Yeah, not past died.
To this gap in the fence, they both slipped through, and they kept on walking up the hill. Just a couple of minutes later, they reached this clearing, which was at the top of this hill. And once they were in this clearing, they were able to turn and they could actually see the bridge. It was only a couple 100 feet away from them. And it was totally intimidating. By this point, it's totally dark out. And from their perspective, all they see is this very narrow bridge that they know is 100 feet off the ground at certain points. And they can see there's no guardrails on either side of this bridge. It would have almost looked like a tightrope kind of extending off into the darkness. But even if the couple was really intimidated by the sight of this bridge and with all these warning signs before it, they were able to put their fear aside and just keep on going. And so with David now in the lead and Raquel behind him, they walked the couple of 100 feet over to the start of this narrow bridge. And when they got there, without actually stepping onto the bridge, David came to a stop. He turned around to face Raquel and he gestured for her to come stand next to him so they could take a selfie with the bridge in the background. Because David at this point is thinking, we're not going to go on this bridge. We're just going to look at this bridge, take some pictures, and then we'll go. But Raquel, who he's looking at, gesturing to come stand with him, just walks right past him onto the bridge and takes several steps out onto this narrow, rickety old thing. And then she stops, turns around, and gestures for David to come with her and walk across the entire bridge. And David, again, is having his second thoughts, but he sees Raquel wants to do this, and so he agrees to go. After they had walked about 100, maybe
Probably simping. I don't know what else is that.
200 feet across this bridge, the two of them just started laughing because it was totally exhilarating what they were doing. Not so much the quest for the Popelik monster, but rather the very real risk they were taking walking this tightrope bridge in the middle of the night. The couple would continue to very cautiously but quickly make
כאילו תעשה בעיות, כאילו אני עכשיו בסדר.
their way across this bridge, and when they reached about the halfway point, when they were at the highest point from the ground, the bridge itself begins to shake. And then from behind them, they hear this loud grinding sound. And so the couple, they whip their heads around and they see there are these two bright glowing lights that are looking right at them all the way on the start of the bridge. And they realize it's a train. When Raquel and David walked up that dirt path and snuck through the fence and reached the top of the hill and could actually see the Popelik Trestle Bridge, they would have also seen the train tracks in the hillside that clearly extended onto the Popelik Trestle and went across the bridge. This was a train bridge. They would have seen that. But it's assumed that the couple who didn't live in the area and so didn't know much about the Popelik Trestle, it's assumed they thought, well, you know, this is a train bridge, but it's got to be abandoned. It certainly looks abandoned, and it does. It looks totally old. It does not look active, even though it is. Or the couple thought, well, this is just an old train bridge. It might be active, but surely no train is going to come through anytime soon. We can get across the bridge before a train arrives. But, of course, they were wrong. When the couple turned around and saw these two headlights bearing down on them, they quickly realized they would not be able to outrun this train. The train's clearly trying to stop. It has seen them. It's hitting its brakes. It's sounding its horn, but it's just clearly moving too quickly. So they cannot run to the other side to safety. And because this bridge was meant for a single train to pass through, there was no other track they could just jump onto to avoid being hit. And there were no walkways on either side of this railway. And so literally all they had was the track that this train was going to cross over, and they were on it. And so with no other choices, David yells to Raquel that they have to climb down and hang off the side of this bridge. Now, there were these wooden slats that ran underneath the rails. They ran perpendicular to the rails, and these wooden slats kind of extended off the edge of the bridge on either side just a couple of inches. And so in theory, if you were holding onto the outside of one of these wooden slats and kind of dangling off the edge of the bridge, a train could cross those tracks and not run over your hands or fingers. You would just have to hold on that whole time as the train is rumbling through. So David, he flops down onto his stomach and he's trying to lower himself as fast as he can as this train is getting closer and closer, and he's yelling for Raquel to do the same thing, but she's not really moving very quickly. And finally, David, he gets in position. He's hanging off the edge of this bridge on these wooden slats, and he sees Raquel. She's not quite there, and then the train comes flying through. It strikes Raquel and sends her flying off the bridge to the ground below. David would somehow manage to hold on the whole time as this train went past him. And then once the train had passed him, he pulled himself back up onto the tracks. He ran the rest of the way across the bridge. He went down that hillside. And when he found Raquel, it was immediately apparent that she was deceased. In the end, the railroad was not issued any citations or sued for negligence. It was determined they did their due diligence by setting up that 8-foot-tall barbed wire fence with all those signs telling people to stay back and warning people about the hazards of going past this fence. And so it was actually David who got in trouble for this tragedy. He was cited and charged with a felony of unlawfully disrupting and or delaying a train, causing financial damages. He would plead to a lesser charge of trespassing and would be fined $2,300. Shockingly, this tragedy is just one of many that have occurred on the Popelik Trestle Bridge. Since the bridge's construction in the 1800s, there have been dozens of people who have died on this bridge. And several of these deaths, many of them fairly recent, the last 20 or so years, have occurred under the same conditions as Raquel's. People went looking for the Popelik monster and then were struck by a train. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please.
I wanted to see that one, so Okay. So it's one, two, this and this because we watch both of them. Yeah.
Trying to learn Hebrew? Fact. You're going to forget what you've learned unless you have a resource that lets you practice.
Also the last story. It was, of course, by Mr. Boller. It was by him. This guy, and the story itself was, yes, a bit disappointing. So I'll give it 3 out of 10. No, 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10. I guess. Yeah. But this one is by Mr. Natma. Just it.
So this happened on a camping trip with my girlfriend Alicia, my best friend Rodney, and his girlfriend Amanda. My dad told me about a perfect place to go camping right by a big lake surrounded by dense forest. A trail from a nearby parking lot would lead straight to the lake. His directions were straightforward, and it was actually easy to get to the lake. We got there as the sun was on its way down and the sky was turning that beautiful orange. The lake was calming, and the sound of the breeze hitting the leaves was peaceful. We had our tent set up, and there was still a hint of orange in the sky, though it was very dark in the woods by now. There was a slight orange reflection on the calm lake. It was very warm out, and Amanda suggested we all jump in the water. I was kind of up for it, as my dad said it would be perfect to jump in. For that reason, we all brought towels. The girls seemed more eager than Rodney and I, though. The two got into their underwear and walked into the lake, exclaiming it was actually warm. I told them I'd go in after setting up the campfire at least, since we had already gathered some wood. Starting the fire proved to be especially difficult for me, because I just couldn't get the wood to catch. I'm not exactly a Boy Scout. Rodney took over, and as I watched him try to start the fire, one of the girls started screaming and flailing around in the lake. Amanda looked just as confused as Rodney and I. Then Alicia went underwater for a few seconds, and Amanda started to scream she's drowning. I took off my shirt and ran as fast as I could into the water. But when I got to where she was, the water was only up to maybe my waist. I saw her arms still flailing out above the water and splashing about, and I pulled her up above the water. I yelled, "What the hell happened?" She didn't answer right away and ran straight for the campsite, seemingly out of breath. Halfway there, she turned and yelled, "Get out of the water." Amanda and I looked at each other and listened. As I began moving out of the lake, I felt something strong grab around my ankle and try pulling me down. There was a sharp, piercing feeling cutting into my ankle as well. I yelled in a panic and kicked whatever it was with my free leg until I was able to break free. We made it back to the campsite, and Alicia was already sitting down on a cooler, putting pressure on an apparent wound on her ankle. I sat down on another cooler and checked my ankle, and there was a deep but small gash on the right side of my ankle, which was pouring out blood. I told Rodney to get us both some Band-Aids for my first aid kit in the tent. After patching up the wounds, we felt more relaxed and at ease. We just wanted to figure out what the hell that was that grabbed us. I said it might have been an eel. Rodney questioned if eels even live in lakes like this. Alicia said it didn't feel like an eel or a fish. It felt more like a claw. I got chills as she said it, because I got what she was saying, but how would that make any sense? Regardless, we stuck around because whatever got us was in the water, and we were on land. Nothing could happen now. By this point, it was dark out. The sun was completely gone, and the only light was from the fire. We were a couple beers deep, talking about life, about mutual friends, and occasionally bringing up that thing in the water again. All was well, until a splash came from out in the water. We all looked over our shoulders at the same time out to the pitch black lake. Probably just a fish, we figured. We resumed conversation for a few seconds, but then there was another splash. It didn't sound like a little fish jumping out of the water. It sounded like the kind of splashes you'd hear when a person is walking through waist-deep water. The girls wanted us to go check the lake, so Rodney and I took a couple flashlights and went to the edge of the lake where we were still hearing noises. With the 2 lights pointed at the water, we scanned the calm surface of the lake until Rodney stopped me and said, "What is that?" I looked at where his light was pointed. There was this object in the water. Well, at first I thought it was an object.
I see.
Then I realized it resembled the head of some creature. Definitely not any kind of creature that would live in a lake. It seemed like it was just sticking its head out of the water. We could see the reflection of its eyes. It was looking at us. Then it moved, as it rised up slightly out of the lake, making another splashing noise. That's when Rodney and I screamed "go" to the girls. I remember Rodney saying, "Take all your important stuff and go," which was a smart idea. I took all my valuables and left the tent and bigger things. We ran back down the trail to the parking lot, packed the car, and took off down the parkway. The next day, I returned with my dad to collect the tents, but everything that we left in the campsite was destroyed. The tents were shredded, the coolers were scratched and thrown across the site. I told my dad about the creature in the lake. I showed him the gash in my ankle and asked him what could have done this. He said he had no earthly idea, and we left in a hurry. None of us ever returned to that lake.
What's calling the Not even calling the local things. I don't know what to call them. But this is a valid one. I liked it. 8 out of 10. I'll give it.
My house sits next to a nature preserve on Long Island, New York. I live alone most of the time, besides when my girlfriend who lives out of state comes to visit. Well, I can't say I live completely alone. I have 2 German shepherds, Tate and Moose. They sleep downstairs by the back door of the house. Last week, for 3 nights in a row, I would wake up to the 2 of them barking in the middle of the night at the back door. The first night, I just peeked from the door window into the yard, which was empty. The second night, I actually went outside to the patio to look around, but there wasn't anyone there. On the 3rd night in a row of waking up to barking, I told myself that was it. Someone was creeping around my property every night, causing my dogs to go crazy. I put Tate on his leash and took him out to the yard. Weirdly, he seemed more calm now that he was outside. He wasn't barking at anything. I walked him around the backyard and by the tree line to the woods for a little bit, trying to help him pick up on whatever the 2 had been barking at the past 3 nights. Then he started. By the tree line, he started tugging on his leash and barking at something in the woods. Obviously, I couldn't see too far into the woods as it was nighttime, so I let him lead the way into the woods. If someone were to be trespassing on my property every night, I figured the best way to scare them off would be having my dog chase after them. Tate kept pulling and barking as we got deeper into the woods. I was starting to lose my breath just trying to keep up with him. He seemed to be really locked into something specific in front of us. But eventually Tate stopped pulling and barking and just stood there with his ears bent back, as if he were in a defensive position. He suddenly looked scared, as if he was looking straight ahead at something. I tried looking ahead into the dark woods, but I could only see so much.
No flashlight?
There was this cracking of a stick or small branch a little ahead that confirmed there was a presence with us in the woods. I took this as a time to call out, "Whoever's out there, you need to stop trespassing on my property. If you don't, I'll either unleash my dogs on you or call the police. Whichever I feel necessary to do." There was no kind of response or signs of acknowledgement, just another crunch of a twig or stick being pressed into the ground by something, once again confirming there was someone or something standing maybe 10 yards away. I whistled to Tate to follow as I turned us around and headed back to the house. Tate kept looking back every 3 seconds. I'd have to pull him forward just to keep us moving. But then I heard a footstep close behind us, and Tate started to growl and bark again. It was now that I truly started to feel threatened. I didn't have my phone on me. I didn't have my flashlight. My only sense of protection was Tate. Then there was this sound, this unexplainable sound. It was this clicking type noise mixed with this humming sound, almost like a giant bug. Tate started going crazy again. He was barking and pulling, but I held him back. I kept looking at what he was trying to lunge towards, and I finally saw something. There was a set of glowing eyes, only the eyes were set very high off the ground, not down low like from a cat or a raccoon. I started to run back towards my house now. I could see the light from my back patio shining through the trees now. I made it through the tree line back to my backyard.
What about your dog?
I ran Tate to the back door and let him inside. I turned back to the trees at the opposite end of my yard and I just stood there, listening and waiting for anything. A rustle in the bush made me turn my head about 20 degrees to the right. I saw a figure standing in the woods near the tree line. My patio light lit up the outline of the body somewhat. It looked like it had the shape of a humanoid-like figure, but it was crouched down, kind of hiding behind a little bush. It had extremely long-looking arms in comparison to the rest of its body. And on the lower half of its face, all I saw was black, almost resembling a big gaping mouth.
I mean, you see this
I keep
clearly.
saying it because I knew what I was looking at couldn't be human. I went inside, shut all the blinds, and took my dogs upstairs to my room. I reported an unidentified creature in the preserve to the police. I gave my best description on the phone, and the woman on the other end asked me to call back if the person or creature were to actually enter my private property. Basically, calling the police was for my own peace of mind, but they didn't send anyone. I've been having my dog sleep in my room with me since last week, and there have been no further sightings since. I'll update everyone if anything changes.
This looks a good one. Holy shit. I'll get like 49 out of 10. No, I think 9.5. This was a good one. I like 9.5 out of 10.
My wife and I have lived in our Chapel Hill, Tennessee farmhouse for over 15 years, and for 14 straight years, nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Our kids have all moved out. It's just me and the wife in the house now. February of 2019, bizarre things started happening. I woke up in the night to my wife shaking me. She said she heard a noise outside the window. She wanted me to go check. I simply walked over to the window, lifted it up, and had myself a look outside. It was chilly out there, so I didn't want to be looking outside for long, but the coast was clear. I shut the window and assured my wife it was okay, then crawled back into bed. Before we could even fall asleep again, there was a noise that made both of us sit up. A sharp but quick click at the window. My wife is no scaredy cat, but she grabbed my arm, clearly worried. She asked me to take the shotgun out there and see who it was. I told her to relax, and I checked the window one more time. I was shocked to find a small scratch in the glass from the other side. I said, "Honey, look at this," and she came over. She put her hands over her mouth and said, "Oh my." What did it? We didn't have a clue. Must have been some big animal, I figured. The next morning, I went outside to inspect the outside by the window. There were no footprints in the dirt by the side of the house. Nothing strange at all outside, actually. So we move on to the next night. It was a rainy, warmer night for February. My wife and I tucked in under the sheets again, and once again, there was a sound that could be heard over the rain outside. It was this scraping type sound, muffled, of course, because it was coming from outside. The sound seemed to be moving closer to the window, then it stopped. My wife and I, sitting up again, looked at each other, and she didn't even have to tell me to go outside this time. I took the shotgun from under the bed again, put on my raincoat, and ran outside as fast as my old bones would allow. My wife turned on the light in the bedroom, which gave me enough light to see these huge scrapes in the vinyl siding. They looked exactly like claw marks. And I looked down into the mud that I was standing in and noticed these big feet marks that stopped right before the window. and then turned back in the direction of the woods. I analyzed the marks the best I could, even though they were quickly washing away from the rain. These didn't look like marks from boots, shoes, or any animal that I knew of. It looks like these huge footmarks with claws on the ends. We don't have black bears where we live. 15 years here and we've never seen one. So this just made no sense. I suddenly felt unsafe being out there, even with the shotgun. So I hurried back inside. I told my wife there's some big animal out there, and that as long as we stayed inside, we were safe. We don't have blinds on our bedroom windows, as we don't need privacy from anyone. No one comes out on the property anyway. All I could do was tell my wife to go to sleep. The next night was where things really took the turn for the worst. I woke up around 3 a.m. My wife was still asleep. I sat up, thinking I might have heard something. I realized it was chilly in the room. I looked at the window, and it was open. But that wasn't the first thing I noticed. The first thing I noticed was the head, leaning through the open window into our bedroom. My best description of the head? Inhuman. From the size and shape, it was bigger, and this had a more conish shape. As for facial features, it was just too dark to see any, and it all happened too quickly. I let out one big scream, a type of scream I hadn't heard leave my own body in decades.
It's gonna be a
I
jump
went
scare.
under the bed for the shotgun, but by then, the thing at the window was already gone.
Oh, I'm not.
My wife was screaming in reaction to my scream. I ran to the window to slam it shut and twist the lock. I told my wife we're sleeping in our son's old room that night. Believe it or not, this was almost a year ago now, and that creature, whatever it was, has never returned. But for 3 straight days, that thing kept coming back to our window, and on the 3rd night, it was halfway into our bedroom.
I'd say 4 out of 10, honestly. It just... Why would it stop coming in the 3rd night, like in the 4th night? Why would it... Okay... I'll give it 3 out of 10. Not 4 out of 10. 3 out of 10. Not some problematic. Keep going. Okay. Of course, it's by Mr. Nightwell. So, that's it for today, I think. It was nice. I'll see you next time. Yes. Bye.